Spirit lives to set us free. Walk, walk in the light. He binds us all in unity. Walk, walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light of the Lord. Jesus promised life to all. Walk, walk in the light. The dead were wakened by his call. Walk, walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light of the Lord. He died in pain on Calvary. Walk, walk in the light to save the lost like you and me. Walk, walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light of the Lord. We know his death was not the end. Walk, walk in the light. He gave his Spirit to be a friend. Walk, walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light of the Lord. By Jesus' love our wounds are healed. Walk, walk in the light. The Father's kindness is revealed. Walk, walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light of the Lord. The Spirit lives in you and me. Walk, walk in the light. His light will shine for all to see. Walk, walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light. Walk in the light of the Lord.
Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word, and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word, but does not do what it says, is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and, after looking at himself, goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world.
One day, some Pharisees and teachers of religious law arrived from Jerusalem to see Jesus. They noticed that some of his disciples failed to follow the Jewish ritual of hand-washing before eating. The Jews, especially the Pharisees, do not eat until they have poured water over their cupped hands as required by their ancient traditions. Similarly, they don't eat anything from the market until they immerse their hands in water. This is but one of many traditions they have clung to, such as their ceremonial washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. So the Pharisees and teachers of religious law asked him,
"Why don't your disciples follow our age-old tradition? They eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony."
You hypocrites! Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. For he wrote, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce, for they teach man-made ideas as commands from God. For you ignore God's law and substitute your own tradition."
Then Jesus called to the crowd to come and hear.
All of you listen and try to understand. It's not what goes into your body that defiles you. You are defiled by what comes from your heart. For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these vile things come from within. They are what defile you.
Being clean is very important. If nothing else, this past year or so has taught us about the importance of washing our hands or using hand sanitizer on a regular basis. We see posters demonstrating the various stages to go through for a thorough hand washing in order to keep ourselves and others safe. Not washing our hands can actually make us ill and pass our diseases on to other people. And even before the pandemic, we were encouraged to clean our hands with gel before seeing someone who was in hospital. But the consequences of not doing so are now ingrained in our psyche. In Jesus' time, there was a whole system built around being clean and unclean. And it wasn't just to do with being physically clean, but a person could also be ceremonially clean or unclean. There were all sorts of things that could make someone unclean. And some were seemingly sensible. For instance, touching a dead body or touching someone who was ill. But then, using a bowl that someone who wasn't a Jew had used before would make you unclean as well. Or even just going into the home of a Gentile, a non-Jew. And if you had touched something unclean, then you'd have to go through a whole cleansing ceremony in order to be clean. Now, the Pharisees were particularly keen to keep all of these regulations. And this keenness started off in a good way. They really wanted to be in the best possible state to worship God. But the trouble was that the rules that they had made dominated their lives. In our gospel reading, we see Jesus riding roughshod over these rules and regulations. And the Pharisees were upset because the disciples were eating their food with unclean hands. This doesn't necessarily mean that their hands were physically dirty, but rather that they hadn't done all the ceremonial washing to make them clean. They were not keeping the laws of their religion. And Jesus responded in two ways. Many of these rules started as an instruction from God, but over generations more and more got attached to them until, in the end, the real reason for it was virtually lost. At that point, Jesus said, the keeping of the rules becomes more important than the original commands of God. But before we have a go at the Pharisees, we need to take a look at ourselves. What about the rules in our own church or traditions? Do we have to sit on pews? Why not chairs? Do we need to have 5 hymns? Listen to a sermon? Does a service have to be an hour long? Do we have to have a church council? And so on. It's so easy for human rules to dominate what we do, even in church. And working around the pandemic situation has certainly given us a chance to reflect on the way that we do things. Jesus said that what comes from outside cannot make you unclean. Now this challenges directly the whole system that the Pharisees had set up. But rather it is things that come from inside, how we behave, that makes us unclean. And he gave a long list of suggestions of things that would do that. And Jesus was making an important point. It isn't enough just to serve God by keeping a whole set of religious rules. In addition, how you behave, particularly towards each other and to other people, is a really important part of service to God. Just to worship and talk about Christianity isn't enough in itself. We have to talk the talk, but also live the life. And how we treat others is very much part of that. And this is nothing new, not even in Jesus' time. Passages from the Old Testament talk about this. Take Psalm 15, for example. Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? The one whose way of life is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue utters no slander, who does no wrong to a neighbour and casts no slur on others, who despises a vile person but honours those who fear the Lord, who keeps an oath even when it hurts and does not change their mind, who lends money to the poor without interest, who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will never be shaken. And the Apostle James, whose letter we also heard earlier, develops it further. What do you see when you look in a mirror? Do you like your reflection? Remember that you always see yourself the other way round from everybody else. You only see yourself in the right way round in a photograph or a video. Now, without looking in a mirror, can you remember what you look like? Well, James says that someone who listens to the word but then doesn't do what it says is like someone who looks in a mirror and then immediately forgets what they look like. And James is very strong on this. He still believes that we are saved by faith, but that true faith is reflected in works, by how we behave and care for others. And if we follow Jesus, hear his word, follow him, then James believes that has to influence how we behave. Old Testament teaching, the teaching of Jesus and of James, all point to the same thing. We have to walk the talk.
Teach me to dance to the beat of your heart. Teach me to move in the power of your spirit. Teach me to walk in the light of your presence. Teach me to dance to the beat of your heart. Teach me to love with your heart of compassion. Teach me to trust in the word of your promise.